Hello, it's Jen again, here to check in at the end of another productive week. I had a pretty good week, nothing incredibly stellar, but just those little incremental progressions in different aspects of my life in both work, game development, and home life just seemed like there was this little productive improvements, so those things always make me feel good. This week, I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, sorry, and I was having a discussion with one of my friends, and it got me thinking a little bit about what can we do to meaningfully just make the most of our creative process. That is definitely my biggest focus in life and my biggest struggle. And how did I get to this point where I feel like my creative process is sustainable and fulfilling in a world that there are so many pressures and so much burnout all around me? And certainly I've had, when I look back at the course of this year, there was some times where things got pretty rough and sickness, added pressures, death of the family, they were trying times, but I feel like in the past, those sort of major challenges would have derailed me. And I'm not going to say they didn't affect me or they weren't a struggle, but I feel like my resiliency and my ability to kind of recover from them has vastly improved over the years. And I've always wanted this YouTube channel to be a place of encouragement and helping. But I realized that I'm not necessarily what works for me, what I find fulfilling, and the ways that I guess counteract things that I know through past experiences are going to lead to negative outcomes, lead to burnout, lead to unsustainability. Those aren't necessarily the same struggles that other people have. And talking with my friend who has a different set of challenges, even though a lot of our challenges overlap, just kind of reinforced that. So what I wanted to talk about this week is about taking a step back, because I was trying to kind of distill, if I could surmise what has helped me come up with coping solutions, with strategies to navigate this at times overwhelming life of various demands and responsibilities and wants, and never enough time. What could I do to simplify that down to something that more people could benefit from? Because again, I don't think that my strategies necessarily work for maybe even the majority of people who might be watching these videos. And I think the thing I kept coming back to was this idea of insight. Knowing yourself, knowing what makes you you, and what you need to thrive, and what you can tolerate, and what motivates you. And of course, I can't tell you specifically what those things are. And I think most people, kind of like in my last video where I was talking about how we think we know what we see until we try to draw it. At least as untrained artists, when you're first getting into drawing. There's a big gap into what you think you see as a passive and I guess unconscious observer, as opposed to being mindfully observant. And so I think there's these aspects of ourselves that we think we know, that we assume we know, because we lived with ourselves our entire lives, but we never really stopped to really know what is at our core and what has been just made an assumption because of the culture, because of the environment, because of what we've been told, Let me use an example of like my being lactose intolerant. It took me so many years to find out that I was, or to figure out that I was lactose intolerant, because so much of the things in US culture, like, we don't think about lactose intolerance for the most part. There's a lot of cheese, dairy, milk in the everyday diet, and there's a tendency to chalk it up to other things, like, oh, maybe it hurt my stomach because it's that time of the month, because it's stress, because I maybe ate something bad that one time. And it takes time to kind of realize if you have an allergy or a sensitivity to a certain type of food, that, or environmental trigger to your, you're having a tangible, objective response to it, to a stimulation. And yet it's still difficult and can take years to pinpoint what is that trigger, because it's really hard for us to be really present and really open-minded to all possibilities and understanding and trusting and knowing ourselves, and not, I guess, just kind of falling into assumptions from either what we've been told or what we've been conditioned, or maybe it's even some type of response to some long-held trauma, that we tell ourselves things to try to protect ourselves, to try to protect others. It's very hard to be like completely honest with yourself and what you need, want, and thrive, because it's very hard to even be 100% present and insightful to what you are feeling in the moment, and feeling validated and comfortable with that. So I feel like, a lot of game development spaces are kind of quick to put the cart before the horse, and I'm like that too, because I love tangible, physical, measurable results. So it's hard to take that time to really like figure out your process, to give yourself the space, both in your head and in your environment and your own expectations, to kind of experiment with what works for you. So this week, I love making my lists, because again, I'm somebody who loves, physical, tangible, measurable results, as I was just saying. So I'm constantly making these lists of like my tasks, like breaking down my tasks and re-breaking down my tasks. And that's a big driving factor of what like brings me like satisfaction in the process, is like being able to check off these little boxes, get me closer to my goals. So doing something like a long-term, large-scale, complex project that requires a lot of consistency or discipline or dedication or whatever you want to call it is not that hard for me when I can break it down, because as long as I can see some measure of progress, then I don't get frustrated. But let's say I had to stop and work on a problem where I don't have any measurable progress, then yes, that is difficult for me to work through, and oftentimes I will compromise just so that I can get that measurable result. And that's something that I'm kind of aware of in myself, that I have to keep telling myself to calm down and to take a breath, and to realize that these self-imposed like measurable markers that I set for myself they don't matter to anybody but me, and the world is not going to end if I don't make my goal. And just because I don't make my goal one day doesn't mean I can't make my goal the next day. And so that's kind of what I was working with this week, was still taking steps towards progress in different ways, but like trying to break away from that rigid need for like a schedule and for like making these little micro goals that I have for myself. Because I could start to feel it and this is the insight that I'm talking about, I could start to feel myself slipping back into old ways of just going through the motions and not really enjoying the process. Like thinking in my head, oh, I have a plan for 16 sprites and I need to get X number of sprites done a day. And right now I'm on sprite number 1, and then I'm going to move on to sprite number 2. And I could feel that old, like, kind of like comic book grind set mindset of like, gotta get this number of pages done a day and blah, 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 and just going through the motions. And I could feel myself as I was drawing. I'm like, I'm not really here. I'm not really enjoying this. This isn't going to be my best work. It's not even necessarily that I'm going to hate this drawing, but it's not bringing me any joy in this moment. And so I need to get away from this, because I might be able to plow through today, because I do have that discipline and I do have that ability to just kind of force myself through the motions. I have years of doing that. But if I keep doing this to myself, I definitely will feel burnt out, because all the things that have been helping me to avoid burnout, by being able to focus on the process, on the present, that's not where I am right now. I'm at that carrot at the end of the stick again. I'm focused on the finish line, and it's because I'm kind of approaching the end of my game, and I do see that finish line, that it's hard for me not to slip back into those old ways of thinking that I know are going to lead to burnout. So I just kind of stopped drawing. I stopped going after my goal for the day, and I just wrote instead, which was still like working towards my end result, but like the amount of writing I did wasn't anything that I could check off on a box. It was just like a part of a task. And then later on in the day, I did go back to drawing while I was talking to my friend, and I did enjoy that drawing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that insight is going to be what I think is going to be the key to figuring out what you need to do in your life to achieve your goals, to whether that be to make a game, whether that be to just make incremental progress in honing your skills, whether you're obsessed with measurable results like I am, or whether you're just here for the emotional and intellectual experience. But slowing down and allowing yourself to really understand what you're feeling, why you're feeling, what your kind of ingrained habitual behaviors are, what is coping, what is thriving, what is going to essentially keep burdening you to the point where you could end up burning out. And I'm not saying that you never take those extra burdens on, because sometimes it's beneficial to. The pros outweigh the cons. But knowing where your threshold is, where your tendencies are going to lead you to a point of no return. And those are the things that I've worked on in my lifetime so far to kind of get to where I am. And it's still, it's still, like this week, it's still easy to fall back into old habits and old ways of thinking. And I have to catch myself before I get to that end where I'm all burnt out and looking back at my work and not very happy with how I got there, because so much of it was just like compromised and me just kind of like slugging through it. I want to be able to keep enjoying myself as I'm working through this, because that's what I'm doing this for. So yeah, I guess, how do you get to a point? I was listening to some other interviews with people who have various types of struggles with clinical psychiatric issues, clinically diagnosed, to just trying to make lifestyle and health improvements, to other artistic creators. And I think that the ones who have made measurable, tangible progress in their lives, in a way that seems like healthy and sustainable, that's what they all had in common, was that level of insight that, like, oh, I could feel myself, slipping into an unstable mental state, an unstable physiological state, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of people online that are going to try to give you prescriptive solutions. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of thought leaders out there who are all going to tell you these different steps, to improving your life and your mental and physical state. But I would say, before you start taking any steps, spend some time with yourself. Trust yourself. Just let yourself feel and start asking yourself why. Why? And I think that's when we have that level of insight to be able to identify these things. That's why it's so powerful, when people get therapy and they can put names to various thoughts and feelings. They can have help with that. Because once you understand why, then you can start affecting, really affecting. And it's usually not something that's huge sweeping changes to your life. A lot of times it's very small little things that can make a big difference, even as much as just being more mindful. Okay, this was a long one. I'm gonna try to figure out how to take out the extra fluff. I don't know. But I'm probably gonna come back to this later, because I do think that it's one of those things that I need a reminder on, and it helps me to talk about it, to take a step back myself and try to be more insightful. All right. Thanks very much for listening. Let's have another great week going forward. And don't forget to enjoy the process. Bye now.